There are some men who cannot be content unless they are burning phenomenal quantities of fossil fuel. And the dream of billionaires now is to burn those quantities of fossil fuel in order to escape the Earth's orbit and go into space. And this dream is entirely consistent with the deeper billionaire fantasy, which is of exit, of escape. They have sought successfully to escape from the constraints of the nation state. They don't want to pay taxes. They don't want to be regulated. So they move their business through tax havens and secrecy regimes offshore. They don't want to be the citizens of any nation in a meaningful sense. They're an offshore elite. Everything about them is offshore. And now they want to be off-planet. And there's something particularly ironic about Jeff Bezos fronting this up. Here's a man pouring billions into getting himself into space, while promoting the idea that space travel will somehow save us from environmental catastrophe at home. Well, space travel, plainly, is accelerating environmental catastrophe because of the vast amount of fossil fuel required. But this is a man who runs a corporation called Amazon, named after one of the greatest ecosystems on Earth, which is being hammered by climate breakdown, among other forces, and seeing runaway forest fires, a drying out of some parts of the forest, potentially the cascading ecological collapse caused by a combination of deforestation and climate breakdown. And part of that is being caused by the activities of corporations such as, Amazon. If you don't like the goods that Amazon sends you, you send them back to the company, and it turns out they don't send them out to someone else, they destroy them. All that packaging, all those deliveries, all that pushing of stuff we don't need is contributing massively to the climate and ecological crisis, from which Jeff and his mates say that we can escape by leaving this planet behind and going to find another one. They're never entirely clear about where this other one might be. It would probably be some light years from here, because we've yet to find a planet which could support us. And I don't just mean a planet which could support life. There might be other planets somewhere in the universe which could support life. We haven't found any yet. They might exist. But would those planets have 1 g of gravity, 1 bar of atmospheric pressure, oxygen, an atmosphere which screens out dangerous levels of radiation? In other words, some of the elements which are absolutely essential to human life on Earth, and indeed the life of every species which has evolved to live on Earth. Now, if I were to suggest to you, if your home becomes flooded, if life becomes a bit rough, you could move to the Gobi Desert. You might be a bit offended by that suggestion, but an estate agent could point out, well, the Gobi Desert has oxygen, it has 1 g of gravity, it has Earth's atmospheric pressure, it has an atmosphere. Not bad by comparison to the planets that the billionaires are talking about, such as Mars, which has none of those things, and is a desert, and is toxic, and is completely incapable of supporting human life. They would literally trade the only planet we know that could support us, almost certainly the only planet anywhere that could support us, for a planet which patently could not, on which we would have to live like tadpoles in a jam jar, under the total control of whoever owns that jam jar. And who might that be? Yes, the billionaires, people like Jeff. I mean, they think, we can escape all the troubles on earth. We can leave all those problems of power behind to move to a situation of dictatorship beyond anything you could imagine on this planet. If we had to live in a controlled environment whose slightest fluctuation would be fatal to us, and if that environment was controlled, as it inevitably would be, by those who built it, in other words, those with the money, we would live under their total, unmediated control. With a flick of a switch, they could decide they didn't like their experiment and kill us all. Their godlike powers would exceed by orders of magnitude even the powers they possess on this planet. And yet somehow this has been sold to us as some kind of desirable future, as something we should aspire to, something aspirational and inspiring. We can move to another planet. No, we cannot move to another planet. And if Jeff Bezos wants to move to another planet, if Richard Branson and Elon Musk want to move to another planet, don't let us stand in their way. I don't want to be a hindrance to that idea. And we could organise a whip round to get them all the way, on the condition they don't come back. But the suggestion that we might trade this planet, this rich and beautiful planet which has this extraordinary property of being able to sustain us, either for the wasteland that they're turning this planet into, or for some unnamed planet somewhere on the other side of the galaxy which they haven't discovered yet, which we can move to after they've reduced this one to a wasteland, that's not a dream, that's a nightmare. So the promise of capitalism is that we can all aspire to unlimited private luxury. That the billionaires can become trillionaires, the millionaires can become billionaires, the rest of us can become millionaires. Of course, that never happens. It can't possibly happen because they become rich at our expense, either at the expense of people who live on Earth today or at the expense of future generations as they mine and extract and destroy our resources and pollute our life support systems. We can't all go there. But the whole reason that we subscribe to this system is that we believe we are temporarily embarrassed millionaires or billionaires or trillionaires, and that eventually we're going to go there. Now, even if we all possessed the earthbound luxuries that Jeff and Elon and Richard and their chums have, their extra homes and their private jets and their yachts, maybe private islands, maybe supercars, who knows what they own. Within a few days, we would bust through all the planetary boundaries and destroy our chances of survival on this planet. It's just simply not possible. In fact, even before we ran out of ecological space, we'd run out of physical space. If everyone had their own swimming pool, their own estate, their own tennis courts, their own art collection, their own second, third, fourth, fifth homes, London would cover Europe. Europe would require several planets to accommodate it. We just simply don't even have the physical space. They can pursue their private luxury only because other people can't. But now they want to ramp this up even further and say, we're not going to just have this unsustainable luxury on this planet, we're going to extend our private luxury into space. We're going to have rockets and pour tons and tons of fossil fuel into those rockets and get ourselves into orbit. And this is acceptable because all of you could do this one day. Sorry, no, all of us can't. The only reason they can do it is that all of us aren't doing it. Because if all of us tried to do it, we would cook the planet in an instant. It's simply impossible. So the dream they're selling us, nightmarish as it may be, can't actually be achieved anyway. All it is a massive ego project for men who seem to have something missing. They can't be content with the things that might content the rest of us. Love, self-knowledge, self-acceptance. These things just don't seem to be enough for them. And why might this be? Well, We can argue about nature, about nurture, what the balance between them might be. But it does seem to me that gaining extreme wealth is like acquiring some kind of brain injury. It seems to shut down parts of the human brain. You become less empathetic, less altruistic. There's a lot of science showing the extraordinary differences between very rich people and ordinary people in terms of their empathy and in terms of their altruism, in terms of their ability to understand the lives of others. Something very bad happens to you when you become exceedingly rich. And I think that something shuts off your opportunities for contentment by ordinary means. You must have more and more. The world, literally, is not enough. So another crucial question here is, how did they get so rich that they could build their own space rockets? By not paying their taxes. You know, what we see again and again with some of the richest people on earth is that they are some of the most successful tax avoiders on earth. They channel their assets through secrecy regimes, tax havens. They play governments off against each other in a process of tax erosion, and they manage to pay very, very little on the money which comes their way. You look at Amazon's tax returns, it's laughable. It's a tiny fraction of what they ought to be. They pay far less in percentage terms than I do, than you do. It's outrageous. And so they can then spend that money on these ridiculous vanity projects, money which should belong to us. Money which should be paying for the health service, money which should be paying for education, money which should be paying for basic human welfare is instead being squandered on these giant phalluses which they're sending up to space with themselves inside. On billions of dollars worth of profits, Amazon in the EU and the United States paid zero corporation tax. When Jeff stepped out of his giant phallus, he said something which could be seen as disarmingly honest, or perhaps it reflects a complete absence of self-knowledge, but he said, "You guys paid for all this," meaning his customers and indeed his workers, whom he thanked for making him the money that put him into space. They did pay for it. Yep, they paid for it with their labour. They paid for it in terms of the gross exploitation of their labour, which Amazon engineers, forcing them to piss in bottles because they don't even have time for toilet breaks, paying them a fraction of what their labour is worth. I've seen people sleeping rough on the street who work at Amazon because their wages are so low and their hours are so long, they have no chance to make the money and find the places required to accommodate them. It's almost a perfect expression of decadence. Here we have this man, richest man there's ever been, like a Roman emperor on speed, extracting money from his empire, extracting money from his own workers in order to pursue the vanity project of all vanity projects, sending himself into space. And Richard Branson, there's another villain of the same stamp who has been trying to move into the NHS, suing the government for not giving him the contracts that he wants, demanding bailouts for his airline company, and putting the money, again, to send himself up into space. You really couldn't satirise this. It's too extreme. It would just be ridiculous. If you were to fictionalise this, people would say, "Oh, come on, you're going way over the top here." But this is the reality of the spiral of wealth accumulation. As Thomas Piketty showed in Capital in the 21st century, once you become very rich, you can just leverage that money to become richer and richer and richer. And there's no natural break on that. There's no inherent reason why you should stop becoming ever richer. The only thing which can stop that spiral of wealth accumulation at everybody else's expense is the government levying the kinds of taxation which are required to redistribute wealth and to prevent billionaires from becoming ever richer and ever more politically powerful. And in the absence of that, they will take everything. They are taking everything. They're even taking our life support systems. These billionaires have greenhouse gas footprints off the scale. You know, Bill Gates recently wrote a book saying, this is what we can do to solve climate breakdown. And he listed all these techno fixes, which were basically just a way of resolving his own guilt trip about his several private jets and his collection of supercars and all his other ridiculous and entirely unsupportable luxuries. Disproportionately, to a far greater extent than anyone else on earth, they are responsible for the greatest crisis humanity has ever faced, a crisis now manifested in the disastrous floods in Germany and Belgium, in the heat dome over the western seaboard of North America, in the floods in Bangladesh, in the massive droughts and heat events in sub-Saharan Africa, in the sea actually catching fire as a result of gas explosions, in the fires in Siberia. If this has a human face, it's the face of those billionaires. The amazing thing about these billionaires is just how stupid they are. Here's Jeff Bezos saying, we can solve the Earth's problems by building a road into space and shift all the damaging industries into space. I mean, the most basic calculus, you know, just on the back of your hand with a baro, you could work out that that would cause massively greater impacts than any of the industries are causing here on Earth. And the idea that putting someone like Jeff Bezos in charge of some space road project, which incidentally is technically entirely infeasible, when he's made such a horrendous mess of planet Earth already, is a good idea, could only have come from the mouth of an ass like Jeff Bezos. So Richard Branson, another member of the giant metal phallus class, says, if we can do this, imagine what else we can do. Well, we don't have to imagine it. We've seen what else Richard Branson has done, and none of it is pretty. You know, accelerating climate breakdown, his grossly exploitative, destructive corporate models. We know what Richard Branson has done. And when he says we, who does he mean by we? You know, there's no we in Richard Branson. He's the biggest self-publicist who ever existed. It's all about me with Richard Branson. And of course, you know, we are not actually invited to participate in that program, only in the most vapid sense. This is for us, this is for planet Earth, this is for everyone. No, it's not. This is a billionaire's game. This is a billionaire's just finding yet another way to escape the orbit of humanity. And they see humanity as a necessity because they need to exploit labour and they need to get people to pay for their products, but they also see it as an encumbrance that they want to shed. They want to reach escape velocity. They want to leave the orbit of human society and find themselves alone. So Jeff and Richard and Elon, yeah, they get a lot of good press, but I just see them as parasites, people who are sucking the lifeblood of the planet dry. We can't afford for people to behave like this, and yet because of their political power they're allowed to just go ahead and do it. They exploit their workers, they exploit the living world, now they want to exploit space as well. We're told that our future lies in space exploration. Our future lies in Earth exploration. We've scarcely even mapped the soils on the Earth's surface. We don't even know what's where, let alone how we can use it in ways which don't destroy that soil, the very basis of our subsistence. We are remarkably ignorant about life forms on this planet, about ecosystems on this planet, and that ignorance helps to fuel our destruction. If we put our efforts into knowing and understanding and loving this planet, rather than pouring billions into flattering the ego of billionaires and going off in search of other planets, if instead of allowing them to be billionaires, because as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says, every billionaire is a policy failure, we redistributed that wealth and sought the general well-being and prosperity of humankind, we would all be so much better off.